Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Ann Gillies, and today I am going to be talking to a friend from the UK, Dr. Mike Davidson, and he's going to be talking a little bit about his own journey, his professional career, and he's also going to be talking today on the suppression of freedom. In a particular area of therapy, which we are also encountering in Canada in a big way. So without waiting any longer, let me introduce to you Mike Davidson. And there. Hi, Mike.
Hello, Anne. Good to be with you.
Yeah, it sounds like this international call is, there's not a time lapse now on the video, so that's really good. We were kind of concerned about that.
Well, thank you very much for having me. You've asked me to introduce myself to you, but please do interrupt me. And if I get off track, bring me back. I'm very used to that. So my name is Mike Davidson. I grew up in Africa, but emigrated to the UK with my family in 1999. And because I had struggled with homosexuality in the sense that I was drawn in that direction, I sought professional help in the UK. There came a point in my marriage where I realized that I needed to get help. And I was blessed with good help. And I think that's what makes me passionate about this today, because the way I figure it is if I got help, then surely other people should be able to get help as well. So I'm living at a time in our country where this really is being shut down. And actually there's been a de facto ban in the United Kingdom since about 2014, when what we call the Memorandum of Understanding on so-called conversion therapy was signed by the majority of mental health bodies in the country. That's what really closed everything down from a professional point of view. But now we're going towards the next step, which is about legislating it in Parliament. Parliament, or the government, is saying that it wants to bring in a total ban on so-called conversion therapy.
Well, just let me stop you there. I am going to stop you. So here, your story is that you were married, you had a family, and you were having some perhaps lustful thoughts towards same-sex, into like it was same-sex attraction, we call it, right? So there was that I guess what we would say it's a mental state happening, and that you were struggling with those thoughts because you wanted to stay in your marriage, and so then you went to get help. That sounds totally reasonable to me. It doesn't sound any different than if you were having thoughts about having a heterosexual adulterous affair. What's the difference?
Well, there is no difference. And this is the disturbing thing. So in other words, if you have a problem with another woman or with a woman other than your wife, well, you can get help for that. But if you have a problem with a man, well, that's forbidden. And because of the must stay gay culture, you're told to accept the feelings, dump the marriage, and get on with being gay, kind of thing, in principle. That's my concern. I'd have to say that as a child, and I struggled. And I grew up at a time and a place in the country where this was never discussed. So I didn't really have an opportunity, or I didn't take the opportunity to really deal with this issue. But nevertheless, when I married, my wife knew where I was coming from, what the issues were that I faced in my life. And she was very supportive, and we're still married 42 years later.
Wow.
that wouldn't have been possible had it not been for the professional help that I got over a period of about 2.5 years in the UK from a psychiatrist, but also from just a regular psychotherapist. The relationship was salient. I think they challenged me in many ways. But I think what I respect and what I really valued was the fact that they took me seriously and they were prepared to work with me, and I achieved my goal.
That's the difference, right? You had a particular way of being that you wanted to choose.
Yeah.
So now, just a thought that went through my mind when you said that even when you were younger as a child, you had some same-sex attraction thoughts and feelings. So LGBT activists now would say, well, there's the problem. You never were able to come out gay. You chose instead to suppress all that and get married. And so that's why you had the problems, because you're married heterosexually. And what do you think about that?
Well, other people can have their own views about that. But for me, marriage is sacred. And marriage was also very fulfilling.
It's a marriage between a man and a woman.
Yes. And usually those who would oppose me would say, well, clearly you're bi.
Oh, right.
I just don't like this kind of binary, this labeling system that we have, this oversimplification. The fact is, there was some confusion in my life. There had been some experiences that I think were quite damaging. And because of the confusion, I needed to process things. I was called to the ministry at the same time. I started to prepare. I actually graduated from Canadian Nazarene College. Ultimately, they had an affiliate program in South Africa. I went to South Africa and studied there, and eventually graduated with a Bachelor of Theology. Then went to Nazarene Seminary and just continued to prepare for the ministry in that way. But yet, underneath all of this, there were some unresolved issues. And it caused a great deal of lack of confidence in myself. I think my self-esteem was low, for obvious reasons. And then when my children were born and we later emigrated from South Africa to the United Kingdom, that's when I realized that actually I could do something about this, and found the people who could help me, and really was helped and encouraged. Things began to change. And then you know what happened? And I attended a psychodrama session. And for me, that psychodrama session was like, I don't know, it was like therapy on steroids. That's the only way I know how to explain it, because it profoundly touched me. And I could see, I think partly it was because there was a very supportive group, as you have usually in a good psychodrama context. And because I think some of the wounding that I had experienced was from the group, if I can put it in those terms, now being in a context where I had a supportive group, brought about a lot of healing. Now there was one-to-one work as well, that really worked, but that really showed me how useful this could be. So then I decided to train as a psychodrama psychotherapist. I'd completed a Ph.D. in education, and that was my kind of career choice. But then I thought, no, this is something that I want to explore. So I went in that direction and got about 3/4 of the way through. And it was about that time when the United Kingdom Council for Psychotherapy decided, no, we can't be helping people out of homosexuality. And that's when they decided that it was an ethical offense if anybody attempted to help anybody out of homosexuality. Now, that was kind of, that really touched me.
I
Because,
would think that that would really hurt your heart
well,
very deeply, because then all of a sudden the very work that you had hoped to provide, the resources and the support you'd hoped to provide for others like you had provided for you, was just cut off, just like that.
Just like that. But I knew I had to do something about it, excuse me. So I approached the trainers. They encouraged me to contact the kind of hierarchy of the UKCP, which I did. And basically, the man in question, who was happened to be a gay man, told me that I was in the wrong profession and I should simply go in a different direction, which really was not helpful. So in other words, there was no opportunity to debate or to work things out or to question anything. And then...
So let me ask this. So here is, someone, an overseer, an academic, saying, because you have a certain belief about humanity, and have an understanding from personal experience, you need to get out of this profession. I would think that when it comes to psychotherapy, and for sure, we come into that field. Any of the humanities, often we're propelled into that field because of our own experiences or those close to us, and we want to get into the field to help others achieve freedom. And immediately, because your perspective differed from this person, you should get out of the field. Wow, that's pretty subjective, isn't it?
Well, I need to tell you what happened next. I was invited onto a BBC program because there was some controversy in Northern Ireland, where I live and work. We had done we'd done a conference, and we'd spoken about the fact that, I think it's Mark chapter 2, Jesus touched the lepers. And the conference was about the lepers among us, which was simply an attempt to say that Jesus, was countercultural. He stepped across the divide and he embraced, in compassion, the person who was thought to be contagious. Now, of course, we know differently about leprosy today, but the point is, in Jesus' day, they would have been astounded to see him, embrace the leprous man, or to associate with
with someone that was religiously perhaps deemed unclean.
Exactly.
Right? And so, Jesus went and,
Now, it may have been naive because, of course, the LGBT community and the local press interpreted that as us saying that LGBT folk are diseased, which, of course, was the 180-degree opposite of what we were saying. We were talking about compassion. But anyway, I was invited onto a program and we discussed this, and I simply expressed the view that autonomous individual adults should have access to professional help, if that's what they seek, to move away from unwanted same-sex attractions. And before I left the studio, I received an email on my phone to say that I was under investigation. 1 week later, I was suspended. The reason was that I was believed to be a threat to public health. And 1 year later, because it took time to go through everything, including an appeal, I was told that although there was no complaint against me from anybody, or any client, I could only continue in my journey if I desisted from holding the views that I did about homosexuality. So in other words, I didn't have the right thoughts about homosexuality. And what really frustrated me was that, I wrote to them, I gave them my best insight into the research literature on the topic. I did a good job as far as I was concerned. And I would have expected them to come back and say, well, no, you're wrong here. You've misinterpreted the data, or you have misunderstood what these authors are saying. I didn't even get an acknowledgement. I was simply let go, and that was the end of the story. So this is not a sob story, because under legal advice, I was advised to continue, which I did by starting Core Issues Trust, which is the ministry that I have led since then. And since then, I've been doing the work, not as a professional, but as somebody who respects an ethical approach to things, and as one coming from probably a psychodramatic point of view in terms of working in a group context. I hope that's not very confused, but that's how it was.
Well, I think, I think it really identifies some of the things I wanted to talk to you about, which is the suppression of freedom of thought and freedom of speech. And it seems this whole shutdown, particularly in this one area of psychology, of counseling, I've never seen anything like it. Is there? I don't think any other area of treatment for a whatever. It's not about treatment of a disorder. We're just talking about, I mean, couples go to see psychologists and mental health workers to help with their relationship. So it's not about talking about a disorder or a disease. It's just talking to someone about something that's unwanted thoughts, unwanted feelings. Even pornography in Canada. If you were to go now to a therapist, this is particularly in the Western provinces, Alberta, in Canada, and if you wanted to see a therapist to actually have them help you change the direction or minimize your porn addiction. So change the direction of your pornography from homosexual porn to heterosexual porn, or to even suggest that you could get help for an addiction, sexual addiction, if you were part of the LGBTQ, and that if your interests and goals were toward a more heterosexual kind of being, we're banned from doing that. So this is all about freedom of speech and thought and expression. But something you touched on, Mike, was this academic corruption. That is incredible what you just said happened. I just have to sit back and go, really, really, because your thoughts somehow don't all line up with somebody else's. Guess what? That's never going to happen anywhere in psychology or the human race, for actually. But talk to me a little bit about what you see in the area of corruption within academia, particularly in bias with LGBTQ research, because I have seen tremendous bias.
Well, this is not new, is it? We've seen this in world history before. This kind of dominance of a particular train of thought, and everybody has to be brought into line. And we see it currently operating in some countries, where camps are put together, and people who are dissenting from state ideology are herded into those places and are taught how to conform. And of course, it's denied publicly, but we know it's going on. And we've seen it in Europe as well. We've seen it. We know what it is. It's about an ideological dominance.
So that's really interesting that you talk about that. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just thought about this. In our public school system, if if a teacher has a different thought about, say, the transgender, say a child being one day the biological boy that they are, and then the next day they come in to the classroom and they're dressed as a girl and they want to be a girl. And sometimes we talk about sexual fluidity, and children are being taught a lot of things, and so the teacher may not want to affirm this boy as a girl. And if that teacher were not to affirm that child in their thoughts and actions at that moment, they would actually have to go before, they would actually have to go to what's called sensitization classes. So when you're talking about what you're talking about, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, we already do that in Canada. We tell our teachers that if you don't conform to this ideology, the gender ideology, you must be sensitized. You obviously have some hiding. You're hiding homophobia or transphobia. Well, no, I mean, anything that doesn't conform is called a label, is called a name. And, I just determined that we had got to get past worrying about the name calling, because we need to just speak the truth. And so there's something that's very interesting when you talk about camps and stuff. And I'm not going to read too much into it, but we do. We want to desensitize our society to the sexualization of the children and to our whole culture.
To me, it sounds more like the Soviet era, doesn't it? I mean, it's not something that in the West traditionally we would have tolerated. But how times have changed. From my point of view, and this is viewpoint discrimination. This is the fact that there is a privileged viewpoint, and this viewpoint has access to money for research. It's the particular point of view that will control, who gets to play in this club and who can join and who can't join. This is the group that controls who can publish.
Yes.
And it even controls who can critique whatever is published or peer reviewed. So there is a total lockdown, and it's an ideological point of view. So we have departed from the scientific basis that I think decades ago would have been fundamental and would have been respected in our parliamentary processes. It seems to me that's been parked, and we are now going for this ideological perspective that has become dominant.
Well, I think that's exactly what's happening. And it's, I was thinking, in Canada, that's certainly been the trajectory, but now we're seeing it happening really exponentially worldwide. Certainly what you're experiencing in the UK and in the US, they're experiencing the same thing. So how do you help people? How do you help people who want to be helped not to think thoughts that they find intrusive or demoralizing to them, or perhaps it's because of their faith basis and they just do not want to think those thoughts? What do you do?
Well, in a nutshell, if they come to me, I first have to understand why they've come.
Yes.
If they're coming under some kind of sufferance, or they've been sent, or somebody is pushing them in my direction, we'd have to have a conversation about that. I would work, I think, with somebody who knows why they want to be with me, working with me, and I would work to clarify what their goals are, so that we're not, we don't have unrealistic expectations.
Exactly.
We'd spend a lot of time just getting to know the history of the person, how life has been for them, how it was in the home, how they interacted with peers at school, any particularly important incidents that took place in their lives, the relationship with the mother and the father, the relationship with older brothers and sisters, and all of those dynamics, because that's what's important for me. This kind of psychodynamic approach, I think, is really important.
Well, and from and from a research perspective, it's very sound scientific research now says that there is very little, if any, genetic composition to homosexuality. There could be trauma happen in the womb. There could be various things, but very little, if any, genetic component. So that leaves the rest environmental. That there are environmental features that have formed this individual and created something that they're just not really happy with inside.
Well, I find with this population that once again, they would have low self-esteem. They're very often in isolation. So they have, in many cases, never spoken about it before. There's a great deal of shame associated with their lives. And so we begin to work with those issues. And I guess you could say it's a kind of re-educative process. It's a new enculturation. It's moving away from a kind of infatuation with the same sex to a recognition that actually I fit somewhere on the spectrum in relation to other people in the same sex. Because what's happened very often for this population is the same sex has become mysterious and the opposite sex has become familiar. So there's some confusion in terms of how they are relating to other people. And it's a problem, not with the opposite sex, it's a problem with the same sex in terms of how they've related to it. So I work primarily with men. Occasionally, and only under special circumstances, would I work with women. So it's predominantly men. Men and up to 50% of the people who come in my direction would be no faith or other faith. So even though we're a Christian charity, I think people are pretty desperate in this day and age, just to cut through the chase and deal with the things that are worrying them. So they come from all sorts of different backgrounds, and they just want to work through their issues.
So here's something too I was thinking about. In Canada, they say that thousands of LGBTQ individuals have been harmed by what they label as conversion therapy. And now we could talk about all the different aspects of that, but basically what they're talking about is therapists using narrative therapy or trauma therapy or an eclectic choice of models to help an individual who comes to them. And where was I going with this? Anyways, the issue is that these individuals, like you said, they're desperate, and it's not like we put out a big sign. It's just like they find people who are willing to help them when they look for them, because they are desperate. And so in Canada, what's said is there's thousands that have been wounded by conversion therapy. Well, what I want to say is that those thousands of people were looking for something else because they're part of the LGBTQ community and they're not happy. They weren't happy there. And they're still unhappy, unfortunately, for the most part, because that's what we're seeing. A lot of anger, a lot of unresolved issues, which they deny having, especially the trauma side. That's very kind of surprising to me because my heart is to see wounded people healed and helped.
Yeah, I think the truth is, and people say that thousands of people have been hurt. I think really the agenda is to promote conversion therapy in such a way that actually anybody who objects to homonormativity,
Yes.
anybody who disagrees with the normalization of homosexuality is a bigot, is homophobic, and in some way is connected with the conversion therapy scandal. That's what's happening. But to talk about thousands and thousands of people being hurt, well, we know that's not the truth. We know that the number of people who actually approach therapists and counselors about this issue is quite small. It's not a huge number. So for me, what this is showing us is that the agenda here is about ending heteronormativity in society. And this, of course, were the stated goals of the Gay Liberation Front in the 70s in the United Kingdom. I think, I'm not sure of the history now, I can't remember, but I think it was functioning also in the US, but certainly in the United Kingdom in the 1970s, ending the nuclear family and crushing heteronormativity was the goal. That was the revolution. This is pure Marxism that is being implemented here, and we are seeing the fruit of that now.
Yes, all these years later.
And I think this conversion therapy, I mean, it's neither conversion, neither is it therapy. It's this peculiar combination of two things that really, of course, it was invented by Douglas Haldeman, an APA activist, who in the 1991 first started to use it. And it's now being taken up. You'll remember they used to talk a lot about reparative therapy, and the two were interchangeable at one point. But then reparative therapy was listed as, it was trademarked in the US, and you can go onto that site, whatever it is, and look for it, and there it is listed as a specific modality in relation to this. So, it can't be used now. But this term conversion therapy is highly problematic because, well, in Britain anyway, they say conversion therapy can be electroshock therapy, which, nobody's been doing since the 1960s. And psychotherapists never did. It was only the Royal College of Psychiatrists and the General Medical Council who were busy with that. So it's electroshock therapy. They mention things like frontal lobotomies, chemical castration, and corrective rape. Now, where, who in Britain and presumably Canada has ever been convicted of conversion of corrective rape? So from my point of view, what's happening here, you see, is these extremes are put up as the kind of norm and something associated with conversion therapy. And, the majority of people will take a step back and see these all as extreme. And so it kind of wipes out any more nuanced, regular, a standard psychotherapeutic and counseling help that can be applied for this. And
Yeah.
so then if we try and defend conversion therapy, you know, we're just defending the indefensible, because it sounds like we're saying, no, it's okay. All these weird things that were done in the past. That's
Well,
not
what happened?
about.
What happened in Canada, of course, is the media really began to talk about conversion therapy and their language was shock therapy. You know, the coercion. People are being coerced. They're doing conversion therapy in church basements. Well, what is conversion therapy? And you see all of the things you just talked about and that I just mentioned, they were outlawed from psychology decades ago. We have laws against those kind of things. But now the so-called conversion therapy that the average person heard about in the last 5 years, of all of the coercive things and the bad practice, that's conversion therapy. And so their minds are made up, like you said, but the real bylaws state none of that. They don't have any of those things that need to be eliminated. It's all about talking about same-sex attraction. I mean, it's really just to suppress the individual who is struggling from getting the help they're asking for. So, and I know that we're kind of getting a little short on time here, but tell me a little bit about core issues trust and what's been happening to you, because when we talk about suppression of freedom, you know, we live in democratic countries, both of us, and many people watching will be from democratic countries, and yet there seem to be some pretty strange things happening when it comes to speaking out or just helping people with same-sex attraction, unwanted same-sex attraction.
So Core Issues Trust was established or first came into existence in 2007. In 2011, it was registered as a limited company. And in 2016, it became a charity, so a non-profit, but in the United Kingdom, a registered charity, which it remains today. Now, activists are unhappy about the fact that we are, you know, registered and responsible to the Charity Commission in terms of how we operate. They don't want it. So there's been a lot of work to try and dislodge us, and they want to see us gone. They say that we're faith-based, so that's a problem in terms of the public interest. And also they want to claim that the work that we do should be outlawed, in fact, criminalized, all of those things. The latest trend, and I don't know if it's happening in Canada, is that therapeutic choice, which is our preferred term, is being, in this context, is being accused of being, what is the word? Torture.
Therapeutic choice is torture.
Well, they're saying that so-called conversion therapy is equivalent to torture. And now you can check, just Google it, just Google conversion therapy and torture. And this goes back to a 2014 event in the United Nations in Geneva, which actually I attended, when an activist by the name of Samuel Brinton accused the US as defaulting on its responsibility in terms of torture because it allowed so-called conversion therapy. And from that point on, there's been an attempt continually to associate what we do with torture. So you can see where this is going. This is being linked to extremism.
Yes.
That's the very worrying thing. Okay, now Core Issues Trust is simply a gospel initiative that seeks to compassionately offer the gospel of Christ to men and women who want to move away from unwanted same-sex attractions. I've already said we don't make it a condition because it's whosoever. We don't, do a preach before we offer any help. It's not like that. We listen to the individual, we understand what the goal is, and we work with them. Sometimes they do come to faith, but not necessarily. So it's a Christian initiative, and it just works to help individuals on the one hand, but secondly, it also we work to engage with the media, so we don't shy away from hostile media. We'll allow ourselves to debate and to get into that. We'll do our best to engage in the public sphere and to speak gospel truths, but also to pay very careful attention to the scientific and professional literature around all of this. We've now developed the International Federation for Therapeutic and Counseling Choice, which is really an attempt to establish an alternative professional body that will embrace Judeo-Christian values in terms of an understanding of marriage, of the body, and human sexuality. So that's how we work.
So can I just ask you, Core Issues Trust, what's the website? I just want to put that across the screen if I can.
It's core, C-O-R-E -issues.
Okay.
.org.
So core-issues.org. Okay. I just put that up here. Okay.
Can I tell you about something else that we're excited about? There's a movement in Europe which we call, it's another project that we're involved in. It's called xoutloud.
Oh, I've heard, yes.
So, and you can go, it's just one word, xoutloud.com. And it's on YouTube. They broadcast every week a story from different places, mostly Europeans, but some from North America. We haven't had any Canadians yet. If there are any who would like to participate, we'd love to have them. But that's an exciting work. This is led by two young folk from the island of Malta, where, of course, in Malta, it was outlawed in 2016, so-called conversion therapy. But they have, gone through the fire, gone through a lot of criticism, but continued faithfully in their testimony and in their proclamation of freedom. And the fact that to achieve that, you can also get professional help.
Well, it's interesting when you talk about them standing firm. I know for my son, when he left the LGBTQ, it was anything but happy for him. Like he liked being part of that community. But when he started to really look at identity and begin to believe something different about how we wanted to be, oh my goodness, he was ostracized, he was intimidated, he was criticized, he was, it was very, very hostile. They were hostile. It's like, wow, you either are with us 100% or you're not part of us. We don't want you. And I thought, wow, that's certainly not what we hear about tolerance. So there's a lot of intolerance out there. And
and that's a cult, once gay, always gay. And if you dare leave, we're going to persecute you. And if you do leave, well, we won't accept what your experience is.
And we won't accept anything you say. And so that's happening in a big way with this, the new, it's a new group, right? Another new group of detransistors, because these young, mostly young women, are now, you know, getting into their 20s, mid-20s, early 30s, and going, I don't want this. This is not what I thought it would be, and I don't like it. But that's a whole other talk, perhaps. So we better cut this shorter. But it's so good. Any final thoughts and comments that you want to add, Mike? And then we'll call it a day.
Well, it's core-issues.org, just so that you know.
I thought I did that right. Oh dear. Ah, I thought I put it in. I think I did, and it. Yeah. Anyways, I'll claim inefficiency here.
But I just wanted to say, Anne, we follow you at a distance. We're very thankful for the work that you do, and it's a comfort to know that there are skilled trauma therapists at work who have a perspective on this. We know that you'll be coming over to Europe later on in the year. We're really looking forward to that. You'll be so welcome. And thank you for what you are doing in lifting up the truth there in Canada. We're with you.
Well, thank you. I just, yeah, it's not an easy journey, but it is fulfilling in many ways, because as I hear stories like yours and many, many others, I mean, you cannot sit quiet and just see people bulldozed into submission. I just cannot do that. So, yeah, so we will see you. Hopefully, if we are able to fly, if I'm able to fly out of this country, but hopefully by winter that will happen. So all the best, Mike. Thank you for talking to me today and for sharing your life, sharing what's been going on, and for all the work that you do as well. All the best.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.